A police officer has been suspended and another placed on restricted duties after video footage emerged showing a man being detained on the ground as he shouted, "Get off my neck." The incident happened in Islington in North London yesterday evening after police were called to reports of a fight. Although it's not clear what happened in the moments beforehand, the Met's Deputy Commissioner has tonight described the footage as extremely disturbing. Simeon Brown has this report, and be warned, it does contain disturbing images from the start.
Right, get off my neck! Remove a knee from his leg. Are you going to behave yourself? I ain't done anything wrong.
Get off my neck. Those are the words of the middle-aged man held down by the knee of an officer on his neck. The crowd gathered now demand the officer remove his knee to help this man breathe. The officer does just that, but the man is still visibly in distress. As a crowd gathers, the officer radios. Here we see a flood of officers arriving. So you heard shouts and then you came out of your room to see what happened. So what happened?
After hearing him say, "I can't breathe" 3 times, I ran downstairs. He was on the floor. They just removed his knee and then they pushed him over in head like that and put him in a headlock.
Hey, boy! Get him from there! Stay on! Help me!
This is the footage shared with us. "I can't breathe," the man shouts loudly, a phrase that has gone viral, especially since the killing of George Floyd sparked global protests. He was held down by officers from the Minneapolis City Police with their knee against his neck, similar to this. At the time, Britain's biggest police force even condemned the police techniques that led to George Floyd's death.
I would draw a distinction, actually, between the United States with its history, its culture, its policing models, and ours.
But today, the Met is facing anger over officers using similar policing techniques seen in the US. And the Deputy Commissioner said this.
The video footage that I've seen today and is circulating on social media is extremely disturbing. Some of the techniques used cause me great concern. They're not taught in police training. One officer has been suspended and another officer has been removed from operational duty, but not suspended at this time. We have referred the matter to the IOPC.
Wait, he didn't do anything!
In recent weeks, police forces here have been facing serious allegations over racial profiling. The couple in this police car received an apology from the Met and say they had been stopped 15 times after upgrading their car. The officers here were also referred to the IOPC.
I don't know who you are, so...
Well, why do you need to know who we are? We're at our house.
Because I'm making an inquiry.
Why?
Because I can.
In Ipswich, this encounter was also referred to the police watchdog. Another black couple questioned for parking outside a family home.
One of the things about George Floyd's brutal killing and the Black Lives Matter movement is it's reminded us that even in London in 2020, there is too much racism, inequality and discrimination faced by black Londoners, and our mission must be to end that.
The question today is, why are officers kneeling on the necks of members of the public? Where was this technique learnt if the Met say it was not taught? All of this comes amidst growing scrutiny over how Britain polices its black communities.
Well, I'm joined now by Victor Elisa, the Metropolitan Police's former head of diversity and head of policing in Tottenham. Obviously, we don't have the body-worn cameras or footage of what happened before this, but looking at the footage that's out there, can you talk us through your reaction?
Yes, of course. I'd start off by echoing the comments of the Deputy Commissioner, Sir Stephen Howes. It does look extremely distressing. But if you go through that video, you start off at the early stages where 2 officers are restraining the man who I presume has been arrested because he's handcuffed. One officer using excessive force. Through the pleading of the crowd, he removes his knee from the person who's been detained's neck and stands up. But during that encounter, the officer's more interested in the crowd than he is of the person who's struggling, who we presume has been violent, and the officer still perceives is violent. The officer stands up, leaves his colleague to talk to the crowd. Now, if we imagine that this person is so violent, has been restrained so forcefully, the officer's got his back to his colleague with this person who's been detained, which is even more dangerous than when the both of them was actually restraining him. And then we see the officer clearly calls for backup while he's still on the ground with the person detained. But when he's standing up talking to the crowd, his colleague is talking to the man who's been detained. The man who's been detained sits up, and they're having what looks like a reasonable conversation without any perceived threat from the person who's been detained. Then the second part of the video, you have lots of officers turning up. So for me, we can deal with individual incidents, but there's something here about the process in terms of what's going on. How are the control room assessing the level of risk as an incident is continuing to make sure that we don't use excessive officers to try and deal with something that's calmed down? And then two things that really bothers me, and the Deputy Commissioner said that this is not a technique that Metropolitan Police officers are trained to use. But over the last few weeks, we've seen this technique used consistently and also coupled with handcuffing. Again, I started off by saying, I presume this gentleman has been arrested while he's been handcuffed. Now, we've seen other footage you shown on there, Bianca being handcuffed before a search. So that process, that activity is really troublesome because it indicates that...
So what do you think is going on?
So the other thing...
Do you think that police officers are reacting differently to black suspects and treating them as greater threats?
Quite clearly from what we're seeing. That's not the question. The question is, why is that? Why are officers behaving that way? Why does it appear to be a sudden method of dealing with black people in London? Because unless I'm completely wrong, I wasn't seeing the same level and number of incidents on social media 5-10 years ago. So something has happened recently where officers either feel more threatened with black people in London and they're behaving that way. And the other thing is, and again, I really appreciate the comment that the Deputy Commissioner has made, but where is the leadership? This is such a consistent practice that we've seen just recently. There has to be a leadership issue. Again, I'm reassured that the officer has been referred to the IOPC, but we can't keep dealing with individual incidents as if they're separate incidents. There's far too many of them that's really troublesome, that indicates a pattern of activity going on here that needs clear leadership to stop it or give clear instructions that that type of restraining technique...
Well, for weeks, we've been told that things are different in this country to America and that police don't do the same things. And yet we see on video, a knee on a neck. Is it possible that these last few weeks have actually seen that relationship get even worse? That young black people will trust the police even less, and young police officers may feel even more afraid of how they will be treated by people they're trying to arrest?
So what I'm seeing in these videos, it appears to me that police officers are afraid of young black people. In the clips, the tiny clips that we see, more often than not, officers are in a state of readiness to use force to deal with a situation in front of them that involves a black person. That is worrying. If that's the level of anxiety that cops are feeling on the streets of London, that is genuinely worrying. And there needs to be a conversation with the black community about why that is happening, and more clearly a conversation within the police about why that is happening. Equally, and you're saying a young black men in London distrusting the police, I think that's always been there. But what's even more worrying, you look at the crowd of people in this particular incident that have different ethnicity, different age, different possible social class. They're going to start distrusting the police. That is far worse than just a small category that the police might think. Small category of London community who distrust them is growing. The number of people who've seen this and actually thinking this is not right leaves the Metropolitan Police in a really difficult position to try and reassure all Londoners that they actually carry out policing service equitably, fairly
Victor Elisa,
across London.
thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.